Patrick Dunn took pride in being a dedicated worker and a loving husband. After completing his electrician training, he committed himself to his work, becoming one of the most dependable employees at Anderson Electric. Despite long hours, he always made time for his wife. Their 8-year marriage seemed strong, but recently Patrick noticed subtle changes. Inda's behavior that left him uneasy. Inda, a sociology professor, was always organized and ambitious. When she got the chance to attend seminars in Columbus, she was eager to go. Patrick offered to accompany her, but she insisted on going alone, citing the importance of the professional development opportunity and reminding him of their upcoming spring break vacation. Trusting her, Patrick agreed, though her insistence that he stay behind made him uneasy. Patrick arrived home around 6 p.m. on Wednesday, exhausted from a long day at work. He had stayed late to finish a wiring task, completing it sooner than expected, but leaving him sore. The quiet house reminded him that Inda had left earlier for a 3-day seminar in Columbus. He had offered to take the day off to join her, but she had urged him to stay, reminding him of their upcoming cruise. The tickets displayed on their sideboard were a constant reminder of the trip ahead. As he entered, he noticed there was no message from Inda confirming her safe arrival, which concerned him. He decided to call her, and she answered cheerfully after 2 rings, easing his worry. "I was just about to call you, Patrick. You must be reading my mind," she said. Sounding happy, he heard the buzz of a crowd in the background, which didn't surprise him, since the caller ID would have shown it was him, you know. "I always read your thoughts, so you arrived safely. How was the trip?" he joked. She laughed. "It went smoothly thanks to the map you printed. The traffic was light, and I found the Sheraton without any trouble." "Anything for you, darling." Patrick said warmly, "I even thought about asking my boss for time off to join you." "No, you're not coming here." She quickly replied, her voice a bit sharp before softening. "We agreed to wait until spring break to go somewhere together." "Just teasing, Glinda." "I didn't ask him," Patrick responded, though her strong reaction troubled him. "I'll stay home and behave. I'm glad to hear that it's going to be a busy week with seminars, so we wouldn't have much time together anyway," she said, sounding relieved. "Is there something you wanted to talk about?" Patrick asked. "Oh, I can't find my travel bag with my sewing kit and lint brush." "Could you check the bedroom if it's not there? Maybe it's in the car trunk." "Sure, hang on," Patrick said. Heading to the bedroom, he found the bag on the dresser and picked up the portable phone. "Found it. It's on the dresser. Thank goodness. I didn't want to go to the garage to look for it. I'll grab what I need at the hotel store if necessary." She paused. "I have to go now. I'm third in line at the front desk. I probably won't call much this week. I've got a presentation tomorrow night and a dinner Friday. My last seminar is Saturday morning, so I'll be home by dinner." "That's fine, honey. I'll be busy too. Call if you can, and I'll see you at dinner on Saturday," Patrick replied. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, Patrick hung up the phone and found himself thinking about Inda's unusual reaction to his joke about joining her. Lately she'd been acting strangely, sometimes too quiet, other times overly accommodating. Even when they first discussed him accompanying her on this trip, she had firmly rejected the idea. Pushing these thoughts aside, Patrick realized he was hungry and decided to order pizza. With about 40 minutes until the delivery, he headed upstairs to shower and change into casual jeans and a work t-shirt. Afterward, he relaxed at the kitchen table with a beer until the pizza arrived. Although he knew he should cook something healthier, he didn't worry about it since his job kept him in shape, and Inda wasn't around to disapprove. He planned to save the leftovers for lunch at work, where he could easily reheat them. Patrick spent the next hour watching the news, but his thoughts drifted back to Tonga in her recent behavior. Something had clearly changed in her over the past couple of months, and her strong rejection of his offer to join her on the trip bothered. Inda, a 35-year-old sociology professor, was a striking beauty with long dark hair and dark eyes. She'd recently been hired at the local college, where she was proud to be a junior faculty member. She had mentioned her teaching assistant Anthony several times at the beginning of the semester, but hadn't talked about him in a while, and mid-November brought up the seminars she wanted to attend during the break between semesters. Initially she didn't mind Patrick joining her, but within 2 weeks she was adamant about going alone, suggesting they plan a trip together for spring break instead. Patrick reluctantly agreed to her decision. They didn't talk much about the seminars over Christmas, and they enjoyed a wonderful holiday with family and friends. Patrick noticed some large envelopes with registration materials that Inda quickly sent back. She seemed eager for the trip, and even started packing days before the new year, which was typical of her organized nature. Around 8 p.m. Patrick returned to the bedroom, intending to continue reading a book he had left on the nightstand. He decided to put away the Banda had mentioned earlier, and noticed it was sitting on top of her diary, a book he thought she usually kept in her briefcase. In their 8 years of marriage, Patrick had rarely seen her diary since she kept it well hidden. She had made it clear early on that it was private, and they never discussed it again. He suspected she wrote in it at college or while he was at work. Curious, Patrick picked up the diary, touching it for the first time. It was a small red leather book with a brass lock. He wondered if it held the key to understanding Da's recent behavior. Instead of putting it back, he took it downstairs to the kitchen where the light was better and examined the lock more closely. The first thing Patrick noticed was that only about a third of the pages in the diary had been used. It seemed unlikely that this wasn't his only diary. 8 years of notes wouldn't fill just a third of a book. He figured she must have older volumes stored somewhere, likely in her closet. Each of them had their own closet, and he had never gone into hers. He headed upstairs to their bedroom. After a few minutes of searching, he found a shoebox on the top shelf containing a stack of red leather journals. He took them back to the kitchen. All the diaries were the same, each with a small white circle on the spine, numbered 1 through 6, except for the current one, which wasn't numbered. The word Coons was embossed on the back of each diary, which he recognized as the name of a local specialty store. The locks on all the diaries seemed identical, with no identifying marks, making him wonder if they used the same key. Patrick quickly checked the phone directory for Coons Specialties and called to see if they had any of the diaries in stock. A young woman confirmed they had 2, and that the store would be open until 10. Patrick decided to buy one, hoping to use the key to unlock these diaries. It was a risky move, but he knew picking the locks might ruin them. Ananda would never forgive him for snooping. Half an hour later, Patrick was driving home with a new red leather diary, the key in his bag. It was expensive, nearly $60, but he didn't mind if it helped him understand what was bothering his wife. He could always gift her the new diary. Later, Patrick suspected she might be hiding an illness as she had done once before, when test results worried her she had kept it to herself until she knew it wasn't serious. Another possibility was stress from work, perhaps conflicts with colleagues which she wouldn't share with him, preferring to handle work issues on her own. However, another darker possibility nagged at him. What if she was cheating on him? He didn't want to admit it, and focused on other explanations instead. Patrick and Ananda were an unusual couple. He was slightly shorter with blonde hair and blue eyes, muscular in build while she was tall, slender with dark hair and eyes. They had known each other in school and reconnected years later at a mutual friend's party, marrying a month after she graduated. They started in a small house, but after a few years they moved to a larger one, discussing the possibility of starting a family soon. When Patrick got home, he wasn't sure if the key would fit the locks on his diaries. He found it in a small brown envelope inside the diary box. The key seemed tiny, and he wondered if he should have asked the store if all the locks were the same. He decided that if the key didn't work, he would drop the idea. If each lock was unique, he wasn't going to waste time hunting for the right key. 5 minutes after walking in, Patrick sat at the kitchen table with a stack of journals and a can of soda holding a small key. He stared at Ananda's most recent diary, knowing that if it fit, there was no turning back. He hesitated, worried about betraying her trust, but concern for her health and nagging doubts pushed him to unlock the diary. The key fit perfectly, and as he read the latest entry, his face turned pale and his eyes welled up in shock. Patrick stood up, walked to the sink, and squeezed the soda can until it overflowed. Realizing his hand was sticky, he washed up and then carried the journals and key to the living room. He placed the books on the nightstand, turned on a lamp and settled into his chair. He opened the 7th diary to the first page, determined to understand how everything had gone wrong. The first entry was dated early June, over 6 months ago, as he read through the summer entries which spoke of happiness and contentment in her life, marriage and career. He felt no comfort, knowing the painful ending that awaited him. This knowledge tainted everything he read. In early September he found an entry that seemed relevant, described meeting her new assistant Anthony Romano, and Patrick reread the passage twice trying to understand the significance. September 8. My new assistant Anthony Romano came into my office. Today he's a bit taller than me. With black hair, dark eyes, and a scruffy beard. He reminds me of a movie star. He left me a printout of his grades and seems quite qualified. Patrick read, carefully looking for more mentions of Anthony Romano. The next 2 entries were about her classes with no mention of him. She seemed content, though a bit nervous about handling her large class of over 100 students. September 15th, DA. Anthony is now helping me with my big class, answering students' questions while I prepare lectures. My female students seem very enthusiastic about him. Some even said he looks like Leonardo DiCaprio. That must be why he seemed familiar. As Patrick continued reading, mentions of Anthony Romano became more frequent. September 20th, TH classes are improving. A few students dropped out, likely finding the course too difficult. During my lectures, Anthony sits in the front row watching me closely. I should give him more work. September 24th, TH. I had a few free hours this afternoon and worked on a reading assignment with Anthony. We got a lot done together, making copies and selecting articles. She also mentioned wanting to talk to Patrick about having children. The first time she brought up the topic. September 30th, TH. I caught Anthony watching me during the lecture again. I frowned at him, but he just grinned and kept staring after class. Female students flocked to him with questions, seemingly more interested in him than in the lecture. Overall, my students are doing well and I'm feeling the pressure of being a professor, wanting to ensure their success. The following entries showed her classes were going well and she was happy and optimistic. She also mentioned her determination to discuss having children with Patrick, and they had agreed to wait until the end of the school year to start trying. October 8th, TH. I'm so excited, Patrick, and I have decided to have children, and I'll go off the pill after the spring semester. I told Anthony and he was happy for us. He hugged me tightly in my office, catching me off guard. I had to gently push him away and remind him the door was open. October 10, Anthony came to my office today, and I'm a little worried I didn't see him come in until I heard the door close and lock. He smiled and said, "Now, no one can see us." I told him to open the door, which he did, but it made me wonder about his intentions. October 11th, TH. Anthony helped me prepare quiz questions today. He apologized for locking the door yesterday, and I told him it was fine. When I asked why he was so interested in me, he said he preferred the company of mature women over girls his age. I told him I was happily married, but I have to admit I was flattered. October 13th, TH. I expected Anthony to come by today, but he didn't. I was a little disappointed because I wanted to discuss his interest in mature women further. October 15th, Anthony came into my office while I was meeting with students. I hoped he'd stay until they left, but he left after I finished with the last group. October 16th, today. I finally talked to Anthony. He asked if he could close the door, and I agreed. When I asked why he preferred mature women, he shared that his first sexual experience was with a 40-year-old widow, and he feels that women his age don't know what they want. While we talked, he came up to me and hugged me. I let him hold me for almost a minute before gently pushing him away. Then he surprised me by kissing me and leaving without a word. I realized I should have stopped him and reminded him I married, but I didn't, and now I keep replaying the moment in my mind. Patrick was deeply concerned, realizing Anthony was testing boundaries. Ananda wasn't responding as he thought she should. He grabbed a fresh soda, ready to continue reading about what seemed like the seduction of his wife. October 20th, late this afternoon as I was leaving the office. Anthony showed up and asked if I was busy. When I said no, he locked the door behind him and ignored my request to open it. He confessed he'd been thinking about me constantly and asked for a birthday kiss. I agreed, thinking it would get rid of him, but I regret it now. I apologized for not having a birthday card, and he just laughed, saying his birthday was in July. I should have been angry at his deception, but I wasn't. I'm afraid he's starting to influence me and I need to be more careful around him. The next few entries didn't mention Anthony. Asda was busy grading tests and essays. Patrick found it odd that Anthony wasn't helping with these tasks, but the diary didn't explain why. October 30th. For the first time, I don't know how to describe my day. I'm scared Patrick will see right through me when he gets home. It started when Anthony came into my office this afternoon. I was reading and didn't hear him come in. He locked the door and I didn't say anything. He took my hands, lifted me from my chair, and started kissing me before I could react. I'm ashamed. I didn't stop it. He smiled and said, "Don't try to say you didn't like it." I didn't respond and he said I knew it. I told him to leave, but he just smiled and said he'd see me tomorrow. I know I'm not handling this situation well. Maybe I should talk to Patrick, but I'm afraid he won't like how I've let this happen. The worst part is I find myself thinking about Anthony from time to time. Patrick read this entry 3 times, growing angrier each time, realizing how close he was to losing control if Anthony were in front of him. November 2. I think I've finally stopped worrying about Patrick figuring out what happened that first evening was the hardest. Every time he looked at me, I was sure he would see right through me. When he asked if something was bothering me, I denied it, and he believed me without question. I realized how easily I could hide things from him. I hope I never have to do this again. November 6. It's been a few days since I last saw Anthony alone. He was at a lecture helping me, and I noticed him still watching me when he caught my eye. He smiled, and I'm sure I brushed for the first time. I'm worried about how I'll handle it when he comes to my office alone again. November 8. Anthony came into my office today while other students were present. As he walked out, he blew me a kiss and grinned. I don't think the others noticed, but I wish he'd be more discreet. I received an invitation to seminars in Columbus after the new year, and I'm considering going. I ordered more information. November 9. Yesterday was another difficult day. I'm unhappy with both Anthony's behavior and my own, and I'm worried about where this is heading. I had some free time this morning when Anthony entered my office without me noticing. He ignored my request to open the door when he tried to lift me from the chair. I resisted at first, but soon gave in. What started as a kiss turned into something more, and I got caught up. In the moment afterward, I ran to the bathroom upset and thinking about how angry Patrick would be if he found out. Anthony followed me in, said he wouldn't apologize, and hoped we could do it again. I couldn't bring myself to tell him. No, surprisingly. I managed to act normal with Patrick when he got home, even though I was still affected by what had happened. We made love, and it was as good as ever, which made me wonder if I was trying to prove something to myself. Patrick felt another surge of anger reading this, realizing how deeply the situation had escalated. He continued reading, noticing no mention of Anthony for the rest of the weekend. D seemed focused on the semester ending November 17th. I don't know what's wrong with me. Anthony has a power over me that I never expected. He came into my office today and I told him we needed to talk about what happened last time. I explained that it was wrong, reminding him that I'm happily married and that my career could be at risk. He just smiled and nodded. Then he asked if I wanted to lock the door or if he should do it. I was speechless and he went ahead and locked it. We've crossed a dangerous line and I'm torn. Part of me knows I should stop him, but another part feels we haven't done anything truly terrible. I can never tell Patrick, but at least no one can see into my office. This happened just an hour ago, and I'm still feeling euphoric. I hope I can compose myself before I see Patrick. This entry was tough for Patrick to read. It was clear things were spiraling out of control. He realized he didn't know his wife as well as he thought and resolved to read all her diaries no matter how long it took. He checked the time, already 2 a.m., but he couldn't stop before continuing. He called his office to take the next day off. He knew his life had changed forever, where there was once love and dreams of the future. There was now cold emptiness and growing anger. He took a break to use the bathroom and grabbed another soda from the kitchen. Despite the late hour, he didn't feel tired, his mind racing to process everything he was reading. He checked his watch again, realizing it had only been 8 hours since he last spoke with Enda, when his suspicions first began to arise. November 22nd, ND. Anthony came to my office today, but I kept the table between us. He didn't try to lock the door or make any advances. I felt so guilty lately that I couldn't let him touch me. I think he sensed my determination to stay on track. I hope I can keep this up. The next few days didn't mention. Anthony felt optimistic as the semester was ending with just a couple of weeks left. November 23rd, RD. I told Patrick about the workshops and he was supportive, even offering to take time off to join me. I'll need to think about this. We could find things to do when I'm not in class. Apparent Linda's decision to go alone changed between November 23rd, RD and mid-December, which made Patrick uneasy as he continued reading. November 25th, TH. Anthony stopped me in the hallway this morning asking if he could visit our house. I clearly told him no, especially when he asked about Patrick's night trips. He then suggested I visit him at the house he shares with other students, but I refused. He left me his number in case I changed my mind. I mentioned the seminars and he seemed very interested, even though they're for teachers only. November 30th, yesterday was tough to write about. I feel like I've lost myself. I barely slept and Patrick noticed something was off. I've been fantasizing about Anthony lately, Even though I don't have feelings for him when he came to my office today, he helped me finish exam prep quickly. Then he announced he was locking the door and I couldn't stop him. Afterward, I ran to the bathroom and cried, "How did I let this happen?" Anthony was gone when I came out and everything seemed normal again. I spent the rest of the day in tears trying to make sense of it all. Maybe I should see a therapist. Patrick saw Glinda's regret, but she couldn't justify her actions, which darkened his heart as he read, changing him into someone his friends, family, or Evenda wouldn't recognize. December 1. Saint. Anthony stopped by to say goodbye before flying home for the holidays. He asked if I wanted him to come back early to join me at the seminar. I told him to think about it since I haven't decided yet. He said he'd call me in a few days. December 8th, today. I told Patrick I wanted him to stay home while I attended the seminar, suggesting we go on a spring break cruise instead. He wasn't thrilled but eventually agreed. I feel awful lying to him. I haven't decided if I'll take Anthony with me, but I'm considering it. I don't love him. I just see him as a sexual partner. Spending time with him without rushing could be nice since he's an experienced lover. I wonder if he'll call or drop the idea. December 12th. Anthony called this morning still wanting to go to Columbus with me. He suggested booking 2 adjoining rooms and posing as my brother to avoid suspicion. He even offered to pay for my room. Now I have to decide if I'm going to knowingly cheat on Patrick. December 14th. Anthony called again today. He tried to reach me yesterday, but I wasn't in the office. I went ahead and made the reservation for rooms 412 and 414 as he suggested. I felt awful doing it today. He's going to pay for room 414 with his visa. He seems excited though. I'm not really, but I guess I'm looking forward to it. Anthony is leaving after the spring semester and won't be in the assistant program anymore. I hope I won't be tempted to see him again after our 3 nights at the Sheraton. I don't know what it is about Anthony that draws me in. Many attractive men have looked at me before, but I never gave in. He just knows how to push all the right buttons. God, I hope Patrick never finds out it would destroy him. The rest of December's entries only mentioned Anthony once. He called Dana at home 2 days after Christmas. December 28th. Anthony called me at home yesterday. I was shocked to hear his voice, but thankful Patrick was at work. He said he was ready for a man to answer and would have asked for Veronica if that happened. He wanted to confirm I was still going as he'd need to return for New Year's to join me. I told him I would take him, and he got excited. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was worried too. I hope this trip will help me move past this before Patrick. I never spent 2 nights in a row with the same man. Maybe that's why I agreed to Anthony's plan. I just pray this brings everything to the surface. Patrick glanced at the clock. It was almost 5 a.m. He knew the next entry was the one he had read first after opening the diary. He was almost done with Nday's last diary, but had already decided to read them all, even though it seemed she hadn't cheated on him before. He needed to be sure he wanted to know if there was anyone else to direct his anger toward, knowing he had a lot to do. He made some coffee before finishing the last page. January 3 tomorrow's the big day, 3 days of workshops and 3 nights with Anthony. I'll pick him up before leaving and drop him off on the way back. Thank God. Patrick didn't push to join me on this trip. I wouldn't have known what to say. Patrick even found a map online to help me navigate. I checked the mall near the Sheraton and saw there's a Victoria's Secret. I might buy some sexy outfits for Anthony and then wash them before wearing them for Patrick. It feels wrong, but he'll never know. I can't believe I'm excited about this trip. I wonder if Anthony expects something new that Patrick and I haven't tried. I'm not sure I'd want that, as it could make Patrick suspicious. Maybe I'll save any new ideas for our cruise, pretending I just felt adventurous. I've started packing and I hope Patrick doesn't find it suspicious. I don't want him to get any ideas after rereading my thoughts. I'm questioning if I can actually go through with this. What happened in my office was spontaneous, but this trip is premeditated. I can't justify it as a moment of weakness. I could still back out, pay for Anthony's room and cover his travel expenses. Patrick finished the 7th journal and sipped his coffee. Reflecting on the last 9 hours of reading, he started forming a plan for the next 3 days. He had already decided his marriage was over. Even if India backed out of her plan with Anthony, he knew he could never trust her again. The thought of forgiveness seemed impossible. As time passed, his love fonda faded and his hatred for Anthony grew stronger. Just before noon, Patrick got up from his computer to grab his cordless phone. He sat back down and dialed the number on the screen. Pierce Investigations. How can I help you? The woman on the phone sounded very professional, which put Patrick at ease. Do you handle divorce cases? Patrick wasn't sure how to phrase his request, but figured it was related to divorce. If you mean taking photos of cheating spouses, then yes. Would you like to speak with a detective? Her professionalism reassured Patrick. Yes, that's exactly what I need. After a brief wait with soft rock playing, the detective picked up. Joe Pearl speaking. You're looking for evidence for a divorce. How can I assist? Patrick, feeling comfortable, explained. I think my wife is cheating on me with a man at the Sheraton Hotel near the airport. I need photographic evidence and want to know the cost Sheraton Hotels got. It is this happening now. What time frame are we looking at? My wife is there now, staying until Saturday morning. She's in room 412, and the man is in 414. They were there last night, but I didn't decide what to do until this morning. She's attending seminars and he just joined her. Joe chuckled at the unintentional pun before saying, I'll need a few more details and we'll discuss the type of surveillance you need. Could you provide their names and descriptions? Patrick described his wife and offered to email a photo but preferred not to waste time. He also provided Anthony's name and a vague description from his wife's diary. It's straightforward. Mr. Dunn, we can install cameras in their rooms this afternoon and leave them until they check out. It only takes a few minutes and I have a contact at the Sheraton who allows us to enter rooms for a fixed fee per entry. If you only need photographic evidence, the flat fee would be $800. You mentioned cameras. Would it be cheaper with just one? I only need proof they were together. I'd like the photos by tomorrow evening. We need cameras in both rooms since we don't know which one they'll use. The cost is fair given the quality of our equipment and expenses. Paying a maintenance person to enter both rooms twice, once to install and once to remove the cameras, adds $100. Sorry, I didn't think about that. I've never done this before. Do you need payment up front? I can pay by credit card on your site. Using the website is fine when filling out the form. Use case number 1 in 372A to help our accountants. Once I see your payment, I'll install the cameras and create a DVD with the footage. I'll need your name and address for shipping. Mailing the DVD wouldn't be helpful to Patrick, so he asked, could you hold on to the DVD until I contact you right now? I just need photos that confirm they met there. Nothing explicit, just clear evidence of the affair. You could email them to me tomorrow, and I'll print them sure thing, Miss R. Dunn. I can take stills from the video. The DVD will stay on file until you need it. Patrick provided his phone number and paid by credit card while on the call. The detective confirmed payment and promised to start installing the cameras right away. Satisfied, Patrick finally gave in to his exhaustion and fell asleep on the sofa. He woke up in the late afternoon, feeling somewhat refreshed and hungry. After eating leftover pizza, he started reading Doe's first diary. This time he read quickly without needing to reread or dwell on the content. Just as he finished the first volume, Amanda called around 10 p.m. They spoke comfortably, both hiding their secrets. After the call, Patrick realized that just as he was hiding his plans, Day was likely doing the same. He wondered if he could ever feel normal again. Before starting the second diary, he reviewed his plans for Friday. He needed to visit the bank and take care of financial matters. He had already quit his job at Anderson Electric and planned to pick up his final paycheck the next day. By 1 a.m., he finished the second volume, but it took longer because his thoughts kept drifting to what might be happening at the Sheraton Hotel. Exhausted, he decided to get a few hours of sleep on the couch. Not wanting to sleep in the bed he shared with Nda. Surprisingly, he slept well and woke up around 7 a.m., feeling rested. After a quick breakfast, he resumed reading, finishing the third and fourth volumes by midday. He then set the journals aside and tackled his to-do list. First, he went to Anderson Electric to pick up his last paycheck and clear out his locker. Gus Anderson tried to persuade him to stay, but Patrick explained his situation and Gus eventually wished him luck, asking him to consider returning in the future. Next, Patrick went to the bank and withdrew over $20,000 from his joint and personal accounts, the most he could without requiring his signature. This money would cover his immediate needs. Returning home around 4 a.m., Patrick checked his answering machine and discovered a message from Betrayal Investigations. He called back immediately. Betrayal Investigations. Pearl, speaking. How can I help? The voice on the other end answered. This is Patrick Dunn. Returning your call? Patrick said. Were you able to install the cameras and get any results? Pearl asked. Yes. Mr. Dunn. We installed the cameras yesterday afternoon and captured footage around noon today. Both rooms were empty when we set up, so it went smoothly," Pearl explained. Patrick hesitated, then asked, "Was there anything on the tape?" "Patrick, your suspicions have been confirmed. We have all the evidence you need for a divorce. They spent the night in your wife's room. I've transferred the footage to a DVD, and it's ready for you to pick up whenever you want. I also have the 3 stills from the video ready to email if you still need them." Pearl revealed tears welled up in Patrick's eyes, catching him off guard despite everything he had read. Knowing there was visual evidence made it painfully real. "Yes, please email the photos. Thank you, Mr. Parcel," Patrick managed to say, with everything paid in full. "Our business is complete," Pearl stated. "Thank you, the payment is covered," Patrick confirmed. "Are you sure everything's okay? You sound different from yesterday. These situations are often very emotional and I'm a bit concerned." Pearl expressed concern. Patrick, keeping his emotions in check, but with a slight edge in his voice, replied, "I'm fine. Thank you. I'll reach out if I need anything else. Your lawyer might need a copy of the DVD. If you pursue divorce for infidelity, we'll keep it on file for a year or until you instruct otherwise. Therapy can help in situations like this. A good therapist can support you through the emotional toll." Pearl advised, "Don't worry about me, Mr. Piarkle. I know what I need to do. Thank you for your help." Patrick hung up before Parcel could say more. His face was expressionless as he sat in the kitchen. When the computer bleeped with a new email, he quietly went to check it. He opened the email from Pearl Investigations and printed the 3 attached photos on 8 by 10 paper. A few minutes later, he held the physical evidence of his wife's infidelity. None of the photos were explicit as requested. After a final look, he placed them in a brown envelope on the kitchen table. Then he returned to the chair, where he had spent most of the last 2 days, and picked up the 5th diary. By midnight, Patrick had finished the last 2 volumes of Anda's diaries. Reflecting on all 6 volumes, he realized Anda had largely met his expectations of her. There were few surprises and no signs she had ever considered betraying him before. He discovered small secrets that helped him understand past situations, noting her deep insecurities and lack of self-confidence. One thing stood out, her clear, deep love for him, which made her actions with Anthony even more bewildering to Patrick. The real surprise for Patrick was discovering that their meeting at the birthday party years ago hadn't been accidental. When Wenda heard that the birthday boy knew Patrick, she became excited and asked for him to be invited. The rest was history reading. The diaries kept Patrick so engrossed that he didn't notice Enda hadn't called, and by then he was very hungry. As he made a sandwich and drink, his mind was consumed with thoughts on Enda and Anthony from the night before. These dark thoughts only strengthened his resolve to follow through with his plans, whether due to the late meal or the images. Anda and Anthony flashing before his eyes. Every time he closed them, he slept fitfully. A little after 7 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and began the day he had been preparing for. He had a lot to do and decided to start early at 8:30 a.m. He called his brother Samuel, his only close relative. Though they weren't at odds, they rarely saw each other outside of Christmas. Samuel seemed surprised by Patrick's plan to visit that morning, but fortunately his family had no other plans. Patrick stayed busy until he arrived at Samuel's house a little after 10 a.m., knowing the kids would be eager to return to their activities. Patrick called them into the kitchen where he sat with Samuel while Mary made coffee. Knowing they planned a Disneyland trip for spring break, Patrick gave each child a $100 bill for pocket money. They were thrilled and hugged him in thanks. "You didn't have to do that," Patrick Samuel said, "but it sure made their day. What's going on? Did you win the lottery?" Patrick forced a small smile. "No, nothing like that. I just felt generous." They chatted over coffee until Mary brought up Patrick and his plans to have children. She mentioned how much they would enjoy having kids around. Patrick paused before replying, "She told you about that?" "How women sure do talk about everything." Before Mary could respond, Patrick continued, "It's hard to say how things will turn out. A lot can get in the way of those decisions." He then shifted the conversation, asking his brother about his job as a restaurant manager. A few minutes later, Patrick stood to leave. "In case I don't see you until next Christmas, I hope everything goes well." He shook his brother's hand and gave Mary a brief hug. "I'll be thinking about you with that." He turned and left, exchanging goodbyes as he walked to his car. As he drove away, Samuel turned to Mary. "I wonder what that was about." He seemed to have something on his mind but didn't want to talk about it. Mary didn't find it unusual. Patrick's probably just passing time. Until Nda gets back from that course. I remember her saying she'd be gone until evening. They walked back into the house hand in hand, discussing their plans for the day. Just before 6 p.m., Munda Dunn arrived home, surprised to see Patrick's car was gone. Entering the kitchen, she was confused by the silence, as she had planned to meet him right away. Although disappointed, she realized the empty house would give her time to unpack and do laundry. She also planned to take another shower, unsure if the morning one had fully removed all traces of Anthony. As she passed the kitchen table, she noticed a note held down by a salt shaker. It was from Patrick. Gus called this morning, needing help at the VI center. I agreed to step in as a senior foreman. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Patrick. Annoyed by the note but also relieved to have some time, Alanenda placed it on the counter and took her suitcase upstairs to start the laundry. Deciding on a long hot bath instead of a shower, she began sorting her clothes. As she carried the laundry basket to the bedroom door, she noticed her diary on top of the tall dresser. She remembered leaving it there with the emergency bag on Wednesday and was relieved it was untouched. She had planned to update it during the trip but had forgotten while the laundry was running. She decided to catch up on her diary before taking her bath. As the washing machine ran cleaning away, the last traces of Anthony made herself a sandwich and soup. After eating, she placed the dishes in the sink and tried calling Patrick using speed dial. When she heard the ringing coming from a basket on the counter, she realized Patrick had left his cell phone at home. Great. How can I reach you now? She muttered to herself, then returned to the kitchen table and opened her diary. She retrieved the small brass key from her wallet, unlocked the diary and began writing. January 7th, Dear Diary. The most intense 4 days of my life are over, and I want to capture everything. Some of it won't be easy to write, but it's necessary. When I picked Anthony up, it was clear he was eager for the trip. He kept trying to touch me during the drive, which irritated me until we got on the highway. As we drove further, I relaxed and began to enjoy his attention. When we arrived, we stopped at the mall before heading to the Sherman, while he went to the pharmacy. I went to Victoria's Secret. He joined me before I could finish shopping and made several suggestions. I bought one set he liked and two I chose. The set he picked was tacky, and after wearing it Wednesday night, I threw it away in the trash before we checked out. I also discarded 2 other lingerie sets, because I didn't want anything to remind me of our nights at the Sheraton. I know I can't erase all the memories, but I'll. Trinda continued writing in her diary, her emotions growing as she recounted the past few days. She wrote about how her feelings for Anthony had changed and how she started thinking about Patrick more. She realized the difference between zest and love, especially after the first night. On Friday morning, she told Anthony through a locked door not to come to her room again. She was relieved to see him with another woman, knowing she wouldn't have to deal with him that night. She also planned how to make amends with Patrick after finishing, used her pen as a bookmark, left the diary on the table, and went upstairs to prepare a bath, bringing a cordless phone in case Patrick called. Once the bath was ready, she added bath oil, lit candles, and relaxed in the warm water. She nearly fell asleep but suddenly felt like she was being watched. She opened her eyes and looked toward the bedroom, but no one was there. She resumed relaxing, thinking about how to make up for her affair. An hour later, feeling refreshed, Glenda returned to the kitchen, put the clothes in the dryer, and sat down to reread her diary entry. She was momentarily confused when she couldn't find her pen, but then noticed it on the counter near the wicker basket. She retrieved the pen, opened the diary, and began reading on Sunday morning. Woke up, ready for a fresh start, she cleaned the house, showered, and dressed in an outfit she knew Patrick liked. By noon she was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, a roast beef cooking in the oven. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. To her surprise, 2 large men stood there, one a young uniformed officer with his hand on his holster pistol, the other an older man in a suit, holding out his police ID. I'm Detective Rankin, and this is Officer Reynolds. We're from the Springfield Police Department looking for Patrick Dunn. Is he home? Menda, relieved, quickly replied. Patrick is at work. I was worried something happened when I saw you. I'm his wife. Maybe I can help the men. Exchanged glances before the detective said, Maybe we should come in. It's chilly out here, of course, come in. Glenda said, leading them into the kitchen. She asked, Why are you looking for Patrick? He's never been in trouble. The detective replied, We received a homicide report this morning. The call was traced to your husband's phone. We're working with his carrier to pinpoint his location when the call was made. Returned Tonda's face. There must be a mistake. I tried calling Patrick last night and found his phone here at home. In that basket, she pointed to the wicker basket on the counter. The detective, skeptical, asked, "Can I check his phone?" He walked to the basket, looked through it, and then returned to the table. "I don't see a phone here, Mrs. Dunn. Are you sure you're not confusing it with another?" Danda's face displayed shock as she realized the basket was truly empty. She quickly approached the basket's location and looked around. Although it was obvious there was nothing else on the counter, "I don't get it. His phone was right here. When I tried to call him last night," she glanced between the officer and the detective, clearly distressed and anxious. "Well, I can't explain why the phone wasn't in the basket where you said it should be, Mrs. Dunn. Obviously, I have to believe that the call traced to your husband's phone was indeed made from that phone." The detective opened his briefcase and jotted down a few notes before continuing. "Does your husband know a Mr. Anthony Romano?" At the mention of the Nemenda looked even more surprised, her face palling for a moment. "I know Anthony Romano, but my husband doesn't. Anthony was my teaching assistant." Last semester, the men exchanged looks before the detective asked, "So there's no reason your husband would have an issue with Mr. Romano? Are you sure he didn't know?" Hilda looked panicked as she responded. "No, Patrick never met Anthony." The detective made a few more notes before looking at her and saying, "Well, your husband seemed to know Mr. Romano well enough to report his homicide." Glinda was so stunned by this statement that she sat down at the table before saying, "Anthony is dead. Heshi was on the trip with me and I dropped him off at his house around 5:30 last night." "How could he be dead?" Detective Rankin sat at the other end of the table before asking, "What was your relationship with Mr. Romano? Could it have given your husband a reason to eliminate?" Hilda's face paled as she replied, "Anthony was just an older student who was my teaching assistant, and there was no reason for my husband to do anything to him." Although she said this, her tone was unconvincing. The detective let her sit in nervous silence for nearly 30 seconds before continuing, "When we arrived at the address your husband provided, we found evidence that Mr. Romano had been attacked at the entrance to his home. In the hallway, we found a travel bag and signs of a struggle. Began to quietly cry." As the detective described the scene at Anthony's house, the estimated time of end of life was between 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. "Yesterday," interrupted, saying Patrick would never do that to anyone. "He's not like that." Her crying had almost stopped, but it was clear she was more angry than upset. The detective checked his notes again before continuing. "According to state records, your husband is licensed to carry a .00.25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. One of the bullets that struck Mr. Romano was recovered from the chair he was tied to, and our technicians have preliminarily identified it as .00.25 caliber bullet." The question of motive also remains. Detective Rankin took 3 photocopies from his briefcase and placed them on the table in front of Onda. These are copies of 3 photographs found at the crime scene. Their location on the table next to Mr. Romano suggests he was shown these photographs before his end of life. "I think you haven't been completely honest with me about your relationship with Anthony Romano or your husband's interest in him." Picked up the 3 photocopies and looked at them in shock as the detective spoke, realizing what was in the photographs. She began to cry even harder, saying no, Patrick couldn't have known. The detective was about to continue when he received a call on his cell phone. He spoke very little during the 3-minute conversation, mostly taking notes. Enda sat quietly crying into her hands. When he finished the call, the detective looked at Anda. "Your husband's call was traced to Windsor, Ontario. The local police found his phone along with his credit cards and a .00.25 caliber pistol registered to him in a trash bin in the Walmart parking lot. There was no sign of him or his car, although his car's license plates were also found in the trash bin. They think he may have stolen a license plate from another vehicle in the parking lot to blend in with Ontario traffic." This news brought no comfort. Tonga, and she continued to cry inconsolably. After watching her for a few minutes, the detective pulled out another photocopy from his briefcase and placed it in front of her. It was a copy of a photograph of a small brass key next to a ruler. This key was found at the scene. "We don't know what it unlocks. Do you recognize?" Inda looked at the photo, then quickly grabbed her wallet. After a few seconds, she pulled out the diary key and held it next to the photo. Realizing they were identical, she completely lost her composure, sinking into a chair. The only words she could manage were diary. The two men stayed with Nda for almost 15 minutes, waiting for her to calm down. They managed to convince her to call someone to come and be with her when her sister confirmed she'd arrive within a few minutes. The detectives finally left as Officer Reynolds walked to their car. He asked, "Do you think he'll be caught quickly?" Detective Rankin replied, "It depends on how well he can hide in the next couple of weeks. He hasn't committed any crimes in Canada, so I'm not sure how actively the local police will look for him. It's not like he's a serial butcher. If he can keep a low profile the longer he's free, the less likely he is to be caught. If he's still at large in 6 months, we may have to request TV coverage of the case. Some of those most wanted shows are pretty effective." Officer Reynolds considered this for a few seconds before asking another question. "What do you think about her story with the cell phone? It seemed like she really believed the phone was there yesterday." "Yes, I agree. I don't think she was lying or confused. I suspect he returned home but for some reason didn't follow through with his intentions. He probably saw the phone and decided to take it with him." The young officer looked puzzled, but if he was home, why didn't he let her know? It seemed strange he just came back for the phone. Detective Rankin stopped and looked at the junior officer. "Think about it. Patrick Dunn had just liquidated her lover and was returning home. The only reason I can think of for him to return is to eliminate her too, and maybe himself. I don't know what changed his mind, but I don't believe for a second that he just went back for the phone." Reynolds nodded slowly, considering the detective's words. "I imagine Mrs. Dunn will eventually realize how close she came to losing her life and wonder why it didn't happen. I wonder how she'll cope